been a while since I've caught up with Declan Welsh in the Decadent West, seen them snaking around at the inner city music festivals over the last few months, though. Saw a tiny smidge out of a very small window of viewing at Liverpool Sound City. So excited to talk about this forthcoming album and what's going on in the world of Declan Welsh and the Decadent West. I'm joined by Declan. How's it going?
Very well, thanks for having me. Lovely to see you as always. Thank you for coming to the Sound City gig. I would love to say that I'd like seen you in the crowd, but it was one of those ones where it was, as all city festivals are, when you get a slot that you're lucky enough not maybe to be clashing with the bigger bands, that you just sort of deal with how sweaty and packed it is by looking sort of at the sound tech. So I kind of made eye contact with the really sound guy that was there, and managed to walk away from criticising former Liverpool hero and, more importantly to me, boo former Rangers manager Steven Gerrard without being physically attacked by Scouse people. So it made me love that city even more, that I could have a go at one of their heroes and that they took it all in good humour.
It does feel like the shipping forecast basement is almost like a dungeon.
Oh
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
big time, big time. It has got that kind of, because like we've been lucky enough to be moving on to some venues that are getting half decent size. We sold out the Barrowlands and playing Transmit this summer, but there is something to being, 2 feet away from the person in the front row and looking them in the eyes at a kind of loud punk gig that is quite unique and special. And I think Liverpool's a really good city for that because it's rowdy. It's like the only city other than Glasgow where it's like people will shout out, sort of like slaggins is what we would call them up here. I don't know if that word translates further than Glasgow, but like banter is the word that struggles to come out my mouth. Patter is what we say up here, but you get people that want to be actively involved in your gig, and they kind of want to see if you can handle it. They want to see if you can handle a bit of criticism, a bit of an interaction with the crowd, and I love that stuff. That stuff, like I would do that happily every single gig that we have, and Liverpool's great for it because if you rise up to it, you win them over even more. So I felt like that was what that gig was kind of like. And I just think it's those moments as well that, as great as pre-planned shows are, and I do think there's an element of responsibility you have to an audience to put a show on and to really think about how things are going to look, how you're going to dress, etc., etc. The spontaneity of live music is one of the greatest things about it, and crowds that are lively, that are rowdy, that want to have a bit of back and forth are crowds that I love to play in front of. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
You mentioned the Barrowlands, and I remember thinking, wow, this is a huge gig for you. And also, I spotted that another artist, Josephine Sillars, who we've supported here at Amazing Radio,
Absolutely.
like in your band. And I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is an extended lineup, huge show. A lot's
It
been going on
was
behind the scenes since the debut album came out, hasn't it?
absolutely. So what happened was when we wrote this album and also the previous EPs, there was a kind of more of an emphasis on vocal harmonies, kind of intricate guitar parts, adding synth parts, adding percussion that wasn't just drums. And kind of after we came back and had recorded this album, we thought, right, backing tracks are only going to be able to do so much here. And, you're at the mercy of a laptop, you're at the mercy of a sound system that's kind of can sometimes process these things in ways that aren't exactly conducive to the sound being great. So we kind of thought, well, we are friends with a bunch of really talented musicians, and Joe Sillars, who you mentioned, who absolutely is an amazing artist in her own right, and has been one of my oldest and dearest friends for ages. We and Joe, and Paul Crawford, and Anke Rockheim, we had 3 genuinely good pals who were all like really good singers. One of the main things was Duncan, Ben, and Murray are like not bad singers at all. Like they aren't people who can't carry a tune, but none of them have ever really done that and their instrument together. And while I think we could back them to do it, I think that it's a lot to add that new neural pathway into what you're used to, especially when you should be focusing on things like performance. And it could maybe make the people who are going to be sort of front and center, which is usually me, Duncan, and Ben, it could maybe make us not perform as much or make them not perform as much if they were had to focus on singing constantly. And I think they're both quite charismatic, good performers. So I kind of wanted to keep that. They all felt more comfortable getting other people in. So we were like, first and foremost, we want people who are singers, but we need a synth player. We kind of need 3 extra vocals. And we also amongst that need somebody to play synth and keys, and someone who's like a jack of all trades to add guitars when we need guitars, percussion we need percussion, and keyboards. And Paul is one of the most talented people I've ever worked with. He can play literally every instrument. He's a drummer, he's a keyboardist, he's a bassist, he's a guitarist, he can sing, he's brilliant. Jo is just fantastic. Like, her voice is so unique. She's got such good range. She's so good at hitting really high notes and is a great keyboard player. And then Ankna's just got this phenomenal voice and is like someone who is studying music, goes and gives talks, attends conferences, understands it at a really deep level. So we were really, really lucky to have the 3 of them as, you know, friends that you could ask and call upon, and they all hugely stepped up on the Barrowlands, the Labella and Gel gigs. I think that's the ones that they've done so far. But we're going to have them all at Transmit, which is going to be great. What we're playing this summer, the sort of Tea in the Park sequel Transmit that's been running for I think 5 or 6 years now, and that we're lucky enough to be opening the main stage on the Friday on, and they're going to make an appearance again. And I think anyone who's not heard this with them, they do take the sound up to like a really cool different place. So yeah, Jo is absolutely someone who is in I think like 5 really good bands. You know, she does her own thing. She's in Rubber Rose. She's in us. Like, she's someone that I'm very happy to be working with.
I mean, as you said, you've released a number of EPs in the intervening years, but definitely time for an album. Did
Yes.
lockdown kind of make you look at things in a different way? Did you have to go back to basics a little bit? Is that why we've been waiting quite so long for a proper record?
I think that it was probably a tactical decision in terms of the way that we plan things, that why release an album now when you can't tour it? So it was like, when are we going to be able to tour again? We have music to release. We've always had too much music to release, if I'm being honest with you. Right back from the first album previous and all the way up till now, the problem has never really been that we don't have songs. It's that we've got too many songs and we don't know how to narrow it down. So when we were in lockdown, it gave us a chance to release some stuff that had been sitting on the back burner, to write some new stuff, kind of as a combination of both. But after the last one, which I think is called, it's the one with Parisian friends and talking to myself and all that on it. I can't really remember the exact name of my own EPs. But after that came out, and we were like, right, probably the majority of the stuff previously that we've released all the stuff we really wanted to. Right at the start of lockdown, I I used to do like covers gigs, open mics, tour as an acoustic artist. I used to play music for at least a good part of my living in terms of live outside of the band, and all of that went. And I was like, right, what do I do here? So I was lucky enough that there was some support for artists from sort of the Scottish government, and managed to get a half decent computer and some sort of equipment, a MIDI keyboard, kind of like a place to plug a mic and a guitar in. And I was just like, I'm going to teach myself how to use production software, because it's going to be this thing. Our guitarist already, Duncan, already is kind of like quite a good DJ and producer. And so he had Ableton, so I got Ableton, so we were able to send each other stuff. And I just became utterly obsessed with writing on this mode. It totally changed everything for me. I'd written everything I'd written in acoustic guitar before then. Just phone voice notes, endless voice notes of me playing an acoustic guitar. Everything that you heard up until probably definitely the first album. After that, still quite a lot of them are written, but after that, it was during lockdown, so I was starting to write on production software, and some of the earliest stuff I did made it into the first EP we released in lockdown. And the way that I wrote on this was just like, there's just so many possibilities. If anyone is listening and they are an artist that is intimidated by production software, that doesn't use it, that doesn't think that it's for them, please try it out. It is genuinely one of the most liberating, creative, inspiring things I've ever done, is to just look all those buttons in the eye be intimidated and confused for 2.5 months, and then it clicks, and you're like, right, I can now. I don't need a drummer to write a drum part. I don't need to have a full band to make a full arrangement. I can sit and harmonise with myself for 18 different vocal tracks and try and figure out how it works, what sounds good in my voice, what kind of harmonies I like. So it just really opened up all these possibilities for me of writing in ways that I'd never really tried before. I had really prioritized lyrics, and it's not that I don't, I still do, but I've fallen just as much in love with all of the other constituent parts of songwriting. You know, melody, chord progression, structure, production, arrangement, instrumentation, all these different things, percussion, rhythm. These are things that I am now equally as obsessed with because of production software. So it really opens up this way of writing that I've been reading David Byrne, How Music Works, and he kind of talks about this not from a strictly getting a computer point of view, but from a point of view of on stagecraft, having to have moments in which the same thing happens for a long time so that you can perform, so that you can build up tension, so that you can get people used to something so they can dance. And I think that like looping stuff is so useful and opens up so many avenues of possibilities that your average use 4 chords for the verse and chorus, use 2 different chords for the pre-chorus, and repeat 3 times and then finish the song. Having the same thing, like the one of the songs we've had out, King in My Head, has the same bass loop for the entire song. And that's the point. The point is that it's like the heartbeat, it's the thing that drives it. And it also just like familiarity and repetition are so essential to what makes songs songs that I think that when you use production software, you're able to tap into different kinds of emotional responses that I really, really enjoyed. So yeah, I lockdown was, terrible and awful in many ways, and everyone dealt with it the way that they had to. But for me, one of the incredibly silver linings of that dark cloud was to discover this whole new way of writing that really changed things for me. So if there's anyone listening that writes songs, get some production software. If you kind of use it already and you half in, half out, just watch as many YouTube videos as you can. Make mistakes. Make your own weird mistakes. That's what music is. It's kind of knowing a little bit what you're doing and then getting it wrong in a way that sounds good. That's most musical innovation, I think.
Some great advice right there for sure. We've heard like 3 tunes off the new album so
Yeah.
far. And it's really interesting to hear those tunes off the back of then listening back to Cheaply Bought, Expensively Sold, which had this kind of real rawness and urgency about it. It sounds slicker. The new tunes do sound, like you say, the production and the kind of the songwriting is really kind of filled out, if that makes sense. What can you tell us about the tunes we've heard from the new record so far? We've had Mercy, King of My Head, and I Don't Know Why.
So Mercy is probably the most similar to what we've released before. I still think it's a bit different, but it's a rock tune. It's a tune that's got a bit of energy. We opened, for example, our Barra's show with that. It's got that, but again, the way that it started is so different. So the way that something like Absurd started is like me playing a riff on a guitar and then adding chords. The way that this started was me messing around with sounds and coming up with the bass loop that goes dun 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 dun. And it's this kind of like sound. I was like, oh, that's really cool. It was just this arpeggiated loop, but arpeggiated in a kind of way where it just repeats the one note, not going from the triad or whatever. And it was just this, and that thing of like a sound taking you to a place and an emotion and being able to fill it out with other things. So it all started with that one bass loop. Added the chords. It's 2 chords. I think it might go to 3 in the bridge, and we spend probably like a tenth of the song on chords that aren't E major. So like you just wouldn't do that if you're writing an acoustic guitar, because you would go, this is boring. Why am I playing E for 3.5 minutes? But what that layering style of songwriting does is lets you stay on that for long enough because other interesting things are happening. A guitar riff is happening, harmonies are happening, drum parts are happening, the bass is doing something interesting. So, and then King of My Head and I Don't Know Why were written again in the same kind of spell of caged creativity that was lockdown. And again, King of My Head comes from a bass loop, and it's all bass synth. It's not I've only just managed to acquire Ben's hand-me-down physical bass to try and write actual bass parts on. So I was working with a MIDI keyboard, and those both started with those specific, really individual parts, and then basically building a scaffolding around these and putting a song over that. And I don't know why it was the same thing, but it was with a drum part where it was this kind of weird. There's like a thing that we've kept in it that isn't in time, and I don't know why. And it's like, it's just this kind of like, it sounds like, I don't know, something clicking, some weird, really small percussive sound that's off the beat. And I don't know why that, I don't know why, I always do that by accident. I'm not sure why that made me write the song that it did, but I think what's really cool about the songwriting process when you work with more than one instrument, whether that's with a band or with yourself in a production studio, is that one decision leads you on another decision, and it leads you on another decision, and eventually you end up at this place so far from where you started, but it's all made sense on the way. Lyrically, they were all written after the music, which is kind of how I work, especially now, because I kind of want the song to tell me what it's about. So, King of My Head, and I don't know why, came from choruses that just fit exactly the melody, and that both of them sort of made sense as concepts very soon. It took me a while to refine the lyrics and to make them into what they are now, which is King of My Head is about reflecting on the experience of, you know, being isolated and being alone, and trying to have a word with yourself and realizing that that actually isn't a very effective tactic for mental health. It feels like you're in control of your thoughts the same way it feels like we have free will and make our own decisions. That feeling isn't really backed up by any scientific evidence. It's kind of a lie that you tell yourself. So when it comes to mental health, anxiety, it really feels like you can talk your way out of it in your own head, and you aren't. The king of My Head is meant to be kind of ironic. It's meant to be laughing of going, you know, I'm definitely in control here. I'm definitely in control, 100%, definitely. I haven't left bed in 3 days, but if I wanted to, I definitely could. It's just about having a word with myself. All I need to do is really 2 weeks later pass, and you kind of have to accept. Okay, right, I need to do something. I need to. The answer lies outside of my own perception. And then the lyrics for Mercy just came from trying to quit smoking. It's as simple as that. I'm not glamorous enough to have, you know, an A-list addiction. I don't mean to be glib there. I understand the severity of addiction, and I've dealt with people in my life who've suffered the real serious consequences of it. But it's more to say that it's not a song that's about really the depths of the depressive parts of addiction. It's kind of about the habit breaking part, and the kind of internal conversations that go along. And I smoked for a good few years, and it never goes away when you watch Mad Men or see somebody smoking in the street that it looks great. It does look great, but it isn't, and it makes you feel bad, and it makes everything else in life harder. And I'm too much of a health anxiety freak to continue to poison myself daily and feel okay about it. Like, I really genuinely am so aware now of how bad that used to make me feel that I can't really believe. I really can't believe that it's something that I did. So Mercy's just about the experience of trying to stop something that you know is bad for you. And again, it doesn't necessarily need to be a substance. It could be a relationship. It could be patterns of thinking. It could be, you know, certain behaviours, whatever it is, that it just becomes quite difficult to put yourself out of that place, and that those thoughts will kind of continue to occur even when you are in a good place. Even when I'm like, I never want to smoke another cigarette in my life. As soon as I see someone smoking, I'm like, that looks great. I wish I was that person having that cigarette. And then I don't know why, as probably the most abstract of all of them, but it's about a story. It's a kind of short story in song form about two characters dealing with the end of something. What that is, I kind of have left deliberately vague. I have my ideas about it, but a few of our fans have come up and said some interesting theories, and I quite like that. So I don't want to over-explain absolutely everything, and I don't know why it's one of those ones, but it's much more about feelings but it's about things ending and how you deal with things ending.
What can we
Thank you.
expect? Obviously, we've heard those 3 tunes, but what else is coming in the new record? When is it going to be out?
So it's going to be out in autumn. I can't be any more specific than that now because talks are ongoing as to when exactly in autumn. We have said a date, but that may be moved due to quite good and exciting news. So we just want to put the album in the best position it possibly is to chart as highly as possible, less because of the financial implications of that, which are thoroughly unlife changing, and more because of the position that puts you in to then negotiate better festival slots, better tours, to play places that you're not going to play. I'm desperate to get to as many parts of the world as is humanly possible. And we're going to the EU this summer. And I would like to go even further afield. South America, Africa, Asia, the Middle East are all places that I would adore to go and play. So getting as high a position as possible in terms of charting allows you to then, have something on a press kit, convince the right promoter, all these different smoke and mirrors games that music is really in its essence. But in terms of the actual album, the important thing, the art, um, it's something that I think is dealing with internal thoughts more than external. Obviously, it's always a little bit about both, they're not unrelated. But the first album is very observant. It's very about things that I'm watching and happening. No funds about being at a party and not being bothered about speaking to somebody, absurd about looking out into the world and seeing people struggle, different strokes about an experience in Palestine. The last 3 years, you'd be lying if you said anything particularly exciting has happened to you. Do you know what I mean? Like, things have happened that are really cool and that I'm happy that happened. We've played, but outside of music, really, outside of music and outside of like personal things, like, of my things that me and my partner have done, things that friends and family have done, the actual like headline stories are not really there. And what happens is that everyone, I'm sure, has been more in their own head than they have been probably before this last wee spell, especially 2020 to 2022. Hopefully it's getting into a little bit more of normality, even though I still worry for people that are maybe immunocompromised or not super, that can't deal with the fact that we're just like, well, COVID exists, deal with it. But the themes of this album are a lot more about inside your head than the outside world, even though they are a bit about both. Musically, I agree that I think it is a development. I'm still really proud of everything we've ever released, and I would never want to be one of these people that disses, your own music or the people that have worked on your previous stuff. I'm still in huge credit to Chris and Quinny that worked on the old stuff that we've done. Jamie as well, like all the people that have worked on the stuff we've done before have done such an amazing job, and I still love those songs. But this album is one that we are really happy to be making. I think that in terms of influences, probably like In Rainbows by Radiohead, the more guitar-y LCD sound system stuff. There's like a little bit of like sort of Portishead. It's like quite vibey, to use a very vague term. It is quite vibey. It is about putting you in this place and kind of leaving you in it and letting you ruminate on what that means. And it's got so much more layers to it, both lyrically and musically, than anything we've done before. And there's definitely something to music that's direct and music that is what it is. But this is something that I think is probably like will stand up to repeat listens, and you'll find new things a lot, which I'm really proud of. Vocal harmonies have become so important in the songwriting for me, and that's something that we literally didn't have any of in the first record. And this is, I think, every single track on this has at least 3 vocal tracks. The ending of the last song in this album is the most cinematic thing that I've ever done, that we've ever done, and that is something that was written. We went to see a comedian. It's called The Comedian, and I had this song. It was originally called Reckon, and it had, a verse and a chorus and a verse and a chorus, and then we were like, I think this sounds like a final track, so we'll make an outro. So we made this outro, and we had loads of fun putting all these like synths and big things over it, and they're all still there. And it sounded amazing. It sounded really big. But I when we came back from recording in America, I was like, couldn't get this image out of my head of we went and we seen a comedian bomb, and we seen a comedian who'd been doing it for ages bomb, and he opened with the worst joke I've ever heard. It was both equal parts offensive and bad. You know, like if you're going to be offensive, you need to be good, or else no one's got anything to gain from it. So it was like this unbelievably offensive, really poorly told, really poorly constructed piece of art that he was certain was his front foot was going forward, and it no like there wasn't a sound, and I wanted to cringe so hard that it became this like emotional thing. And then I watched him throughout this set, realize in real time that his dream was over. And it was one of the most brutal things I've ever. He wasn't a good comedian. He didn't earn any laughs or anything from anyone in the crowd. But in terms of like a human reaction, it was one of the most brutal things I've ever watched, because I think like it is every artist's biggest fear that that is what they're doing with their life. Every artist is worried that they will have the moment that guy has, where they are playing in a half-filled room, not doing well, and they're well past the age that most people would tell you to give up. And for every story of somebody that keeps going and eventually it breaks through, there is 1,000 of this guy, and I couldn't get it out of my head, because it's like this really like specific fear that I think people who put themselves out there, who perform, who whatever version of that it is, I think all of us have got this huge fear that we're going to end up being this person that has that realization in front of a crowd. I've wasted my life. So the song is basically then lyrically became, and I had to say to Luca, our producer, I was like, listen, I've got like 500 different parts for this song now. Can I send you them and can you figure it out? It was like very nicely. It was like, yeah. And the song ends now with this like basically me trying to score in my head the cinematic moment of this guy walking down into the LA night, done, having given up. You know, like having completely spent his whole life convinced that all I need to do is get in front of the right people, and I need to just get a wee bit better. I need to keep improving, and to have realised that there's an element of this where there is something. I don't know if natural is the right word, but some people don't have it, and like that's how it can feel sometimes. I'm not actually 100% how true I think that is, but if anyone didn't have it, this guy didn't have it. But I felt for him, even though on a artistic audience performer level, he deserved every reaction he was getting. Even though he said some of the most grossly offensive things I've ever heard anyone say, I felt for the human being that was just realizing in real time. So the last part of our album was just, there he goes by Melrose, yeah, he's a comedian, and it's this big moment that just repeats and harmonizes, and underneath it I've got tons of me speaking and trying to create that noise of like outside the club, because all you could hear is people going, that last guy was terrible, wasn't he? Jesus, oh my god, man, that was awful. I was trying to recreate that just to put you in that moment of watching someone's dreams die as they walk away, and that's emotional for me. So hopefully that pays off and kind of connects with people. But there's tons of that kind of thing. There's songs that pivot to, I've always did poetry. I've never massively, you could call some of our songs like permanency and all that, poems over music, but there's part of this album that pivots very hard from a song into a poem. There's parts of this album that are, there's a song on it that's just like my favourite love song that I've ever written. The next song that's coming out is one that is called First to Know, and it is like this like most slackery, vibey, Tame Impala-ish feel one we've ever done, that is about something. It sounds like it's about great. It sounds like it's about something that's really light and chilled out. It sounds like it should be on like a chill thing to study to playlist, but it is the heaviest lyrical song I've ever written.